Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, after many years of being in development and an insane clash of internal disputes, we have finally received the third installment of our favorite anxiety-inducing ocean survival game of Subnautica 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of Simply Honest. This right here is the show where I like to give you honest yet simple first impressions of various games, whether they are from indie studios or from AAAs, all because every game has a story to tell. And once again, today we are covering my favorite ocean game known as Subnautica 2. Now, before we get into today's review, I would like to make a preface that this current review is based on the day one early release access of Subnautica 2 in 2026. The game is obviously going to be subject to various forms of changes, improvements, and multitudes of quality of life updates as the game goes on and is in further development. But I wanted to showcase what this game is on day one so that you all can have informed decisions in regards to whether or not you think this game is worth going in early or if you want to wait for the final product. And of course, additional reviews will be made as the game makes major updates and offers more content for you all to check out. Now, Subnautica itself is a series that in many ways can be called a classic. It is an icon in the survival crafting genre. It has been covered every which way to Sunday by major creators and smaller creators, all the likes. And every single rendition of this game, from Subnautica 1 to Subnautica Below Zero, always introduces a new form of a story with familiar mechanics, but in a way that reinvents the product that allows you all as first-time players to experience it for the first time without too many over-the-top expectations. Now, what is Subnautica 2? Subnautica 2, from when we got to play it, is a bit of a different style. Obviously, this game still incorporates the usage of the major company known as Alterra, with the same overall concept of you're a space guy, you crash land, things go crazy. But Subnautica 2, like I said, brings us back into Alterra after a massive, deadly crash, which causes us to deviate from our intended destination of a desert planet, #Dune, and we are once again back on a gosh dang ocean planet. But nevertheless though, one of the biggest things that I found was really cool that makes this game very different is that for the first time, we get to have multiplayer right off the get-go. This particular story takes place while you are playing as a group of clones where you can be reprinted and revived infinitely, and you get to do everything you can to survive in this very dangerous world where you and up to 3 additional friends get to participate in a wonderful 4-player co-op full of new Leviathans, new aliens, and of course, mechanics that still make the game itself feel like Subnautica. Now, some of my initial first impressions when I jumped into the game was a lot of excitement, a lot of glee. I have personally been involved with the Subnautica series and the games ever since the first game and ever since their first initial launch. And when I was loading into the game, right off the get-go, I could see the sheer magnitude of the updates in regards to the engine, the visual quality, while still being able to familiarize myself with the overall color palettes and the game, allowing me to feel like I'm still playing Subnautica, but I'm expecting something brand spanking new. And with every rendition of the Subnautica series and the games, you're always going to have some way of noticing how the game changes with advancements. Subnautica devs, in my opinion, have been very good about allowing us to experience certain mechanics that we enjoy, but allowing them to be infinitely improved upon so that we can always find a way to enjoy the game with a brand new title and a brand new addition to the ever-growing series. Personally, I was actually very fortunate enough to do this review while participating with a friend to test out the new multiplayer function that they actually allowed back on day one. Which again, I was very excited to see this, and I was also very impressed that they were able to make a functioning and stable version of the multiplayer gameplay all within the first 2 days. Because initially I was expecting this whole game to be solo, and then eventually the multiplayer patch would come out in a later game update. But a day one multiplayer update is honestly something that's really fun, and I was actually overall very impressed. And even with just the multiplayer aspect itself, I was very impressed with the overall ability to allow me to invite a friend in with next to no issues or hassle, and our gameplay was able to be more or less seamless without any back and forth mixture of confusion and frustration. Now, even though this game is the third rendition of the series, it is once again very wonderful to see a familiar UI with regards to the health, the hunger, and even some of the various items like the med packs and all that. All of these were redesigned in a new and fresh style, but everything was still Subnautica in its overall identity. And I feel like all of these things allow for gamers who have played this game for a long time to kind of jump back in with this and feel excited about it, while new players get to jump into what can feel like a very finished and a very overall concrete style game that many of us are really excited to play. Now again, another first impression that really jumped out at me was genuinely the brand new environments. Right off the get-go, for lack of better words, the Shallows region is an extremely diverse and offers a lot more of a mysterious feel in comparison to the other games. With Subnautica 1, the Shallows were very kind of level fielded, you had a lot more safety involved, and you didn't really have much risk into it. With Subnautica 2 Below Zero, well, technically it's Subnautica Below Zero, but I digress. Below Zero had a very interactive Shallows where it had a lot more depth, a lot more tunnel systems, and there was still a sense of degree of safety, but also a degree of dimension, a degree of depth in regards to the starting area. With Subnautica 2, you found that overall, the new Shallows region, it's not as gigantic as the other areas. The Shallows is overall very responsive and very much present, but the game, in my opinion, really lets you go out into the more dangerous aspects of the world relatively quickly without needing to swim too far. And one of the biggest things that makes Subnautica very fun is that your ability to explore is dependent entirely on your ability to be brave, knowing that you will not be able to predict what the heck may be out there. And with everything being very diverse, as I said previously, the mysterious feel that I mentioned earlier was about the idea that how when you jump into the game, you start to hear things that are kind of like in the back of your head. You're worried of whether or not there's a big monster on the other side of the fog, whether or not the newest creature that you've encountered is potentially, dangerous. This is something that has always peeked out at me as something very fun when playing Subnautica games, because of the sheer ability of not knowing what is friendly, what is dangerous, and what will just outright annihilate your day. And while my friend and I were testing the multiplayer of this game, we had found that overall, very positively, we had next to no issues being able to be together within the game. Whenever my friend would scan a certain piece of technology to earn a new blueprint, I would also earn said blueprint. And it also allowed us to have a very, very positive experience when it came to base building and creating our own structures, which allowed the gameplay for multiplayer to feel very intentional, but also very, very fun. Just the ability to share knowledge with one another and the ability to craft, collect, and just explore was an extremely welcomed feature that made multiplayer such a worthwhile thing to wait for, as many Subnautica veterans have been begging for this kind of thing for many years. And overall, when it comes to just having a companion in the game to run Subnautica, I think that it allows the game itself to run a lot smoother and helps with regards to just general progression. And for some of you, it may even let you be a little bit braver, because this game is extremely fun knowing that you can swim around the ocean, having a good time, and then you have a buddy with proximity chat who's screaming off into the distance as it fades to nothingness and then gone to nothing. Quite honestly, having fear with friends is just the best way. However, I will say this. Subnautica overall is still a very much wonderful game for solo players, and I felt that with how smooth the multiplayer aspect of the game was, I really felt that individually doing things as a solo player could still feel very fun and still just as challenging as all the other games tend to be. Now, one of the biggest challenges and one of the first major hiccups and hurdles that I personally faced during the regards of my gameplay was that overall, the location of certain resources such as silver and lead even were very difficult to find. Obviously, with every form of Subnautica, exploration is the biggest key, but it took myself and my friend over an hour and a half just to find the first vein of silver before we officially really got the ball rolling. But again, this could always depend on your personal ability to discover things and just how lucky you ended up wandering off into a direction. And obviously, extremely case-by-case situation, but this is just something that I personally found to be a little bit difficult in the beginning, just because it took us a long time to earn things such as the scanner and other essential materials that the game gave us right off the rip. But again, case-by-case situation. Now, from an overall graphical standpoint, it's important to remind you guys that, once again, this review in particular is from the early access and at day 1. Obviously, there are going to be bugs, there are going to be glitches, and the game is not perfect yet, and the developers understand that. I want you guys all to know that any things that I talk about here that might be negative is just from what I experienced, but obviously I expect and am prepared to see these changes be made. Overall, during my time within the realms of Subnautica, overall visually, the majority of it all, beautiful. I was in awe, borderline perfect. There were a few brief moments where some objects would not render properly, and there were a few moments where just, textures would just be really blocky and heavily pixelated, but then it would render after a few moments. And I had a moment where sometimes some of the things like touching the fabricator would boop me off the menu, but again, a minor bug that eventually fixed itself, and I suspect that many other players may have experienced this as well. And there was also a slight issue in regards to the sky looking slightly grainy, and I wasn't really able to appreciate the space view, even with changing my graphics back to high. But again, I think that might have been a graphical error, either from my end or just some minor hiccup from day 1 release. Now, having played each of Subnauticas during all their day 1s and early accesses, I can say that with confidence, Subnautica 2 is, in my opinion, the most strong and the most secured, vibrant showing of what the game has to offer on day 1 release. Previous titles like the very first Subnautica, when you first played into the game, there wasn't any predators. It was just quite literally the world, the ocean, and you got to just swim around and explore the tunnels and the alien planet, where eventually they included things like new biomes, new predators, and so on, as more and more updates came about. And then Subnautica 2, they had a little bit more of a variety pack, more of a vibrant showing, but they still had to do some additions to the game as updates came about. And with Subnautica 2, the day 1 release, we had access to predators, Leviathans, multiple biomes, a fair degree of involvement of the story, and this is all a very welcomed feature that I genuinely enjoyed whilst I was playing through this game. And I also got to enjoy the opportunity to check out all the various voice acting and all the various points of lore pieces that were available on day 1. Now, some of my personal opinions in regards to the realms of the story is that each region within the game has its own set of challenges, and I think the overall story mode is something to be very interesting in, because again, as I mentioned earlier, this game in particular is extremely mystery based. It had a lot of psychological teasing when it came to the involvement of you hearing voices in your head while you're swimming around the area, and that there was more to the planet than just aliens and a weird potential virus again. And I think that what I want to mention, guys, that this is going to be summarized so that I'm not going to spoil anything major for you all. I want you guys all to jump into this game with a degree of interest and a degree of intrigue, because this is something that I really think will be really fun to incorporate, because the story of every Subnautica game is always, in my eyes, very fun, very involved, and I don't want to spoil that for you all. And compared to everything, Subnautica 2 does bring back the tradition involving just a very in-depth story. Everything involving with how the characters are clones, and it gives a more canonical reasons of how when your character either drowns, get eaten, like how they magically spawn back to base versus just passing out and then coming back to life. I think that this is a new way to experience the story, and also a new way to necessarily not like retcon yourself, but to explain how you're still alive, basically. And I believe that as players discover more and more of the game, we are all going to be able to really dive into this new style of a story, while also being able to explore just a new method of storytelling that Subnautica has created ever since their last story back in Subnautica 2. And what many players don't really understand about Subnautica is that they have never really been able to just outright give you a quest board. Subnautica doesn't necessarily hold your hand by painting random edges of rocks yellow, because that's how you're supposed to know where to go next. Subnautica does a very good job still to this day about leaving you cookie crumb style options in regards to your quest lines, where to go next, is your ability to be brave and to explore places that just creep you out and make you cry a little bit. If you ain't shedding tears, you're not playing the game right. I think that with day one Subnautica being officially out, I believe that the community is going to be very honest and very vocal about what they expect, fixes they would like to see, and I predict that this game is going to go through a copious amount of patchwork, updates, and everything that's going to make the official release be a lot better than what we currently have from the early access, especially in regards to the veterans having such high expectations, assuming that they are going to see a lot of big voices be involved with Subnautica, mainly to make sure that we are getting what we paid for, but also that the company who made Subnautica 2 is going to keep to their promise of what they want to deliver. Now, currently, I do not know at this time if the campaign is 100% fleshed out or if there's going to be an update later on with their early access, as the developers tend to do that in regards to their campaign. And I'm really excited to see future upcoming dates with this game, because I think that every update is going to be huge. It's going to add a lot more to the game, and it's going to make us just feel a lot more excited about what comes next. Now, personally, I would like to hope that the ending of Subnautica, at least this one, is going to be more of a closure situation, because Subnautica 1, for example, had a very genuine closure where you got to escape the planet and you got to do your own thing, and then that was the end of it. Whereas Subnautica 2, slight spoiler warning, but not necessarily, you didn't necessarily have a sense of complete closure. Although you got to complete one of your quest lines, they left you in such a magnificent cliffhanger and even a potential for Subnautica 3 that we'll never know what happened to the character of Subnautica Below Zero. But nevertheless, though, Subnautica has always been very good about making their stories, and I'm very excited to see how they go about this. Now, as we approach some of my final thoughts within the realms of Subnautica, I just want to once again preface that within just a few minutes, this game genuinely felt like an honest and true addition to the series. It doesn't necessarily feel like a whole brand new game where everything is new, I have no idea what's going on, but the game offered a very fresh yet familiar perspective that the game series has been very good about giving. And this is honestly a game that I think will still appease many veterans and will still love the game even after the updates and quality of life changes. And just the involvement of a functioning multiplayer on day one was a very good, genuine surprise. I think that even after all the various surprises that I found during my review, the multiplayer working and working very flawlessly in my eyes was a fantastic thing for me. And the involvement of a more psychological based problem and story was very fun, and I think it adds a sense of wonder and a sense of mysteriousness, because Subnautica has always been a game that has always messed with your head in regards to the depths of the ocean, the monsters, and the sounds. So adding a campaign theme dedicated to that, I think, was a really positive opportunity. And with a lot of things coming with this game, I think that some changes that I would like to hopefully see them modify is potentially new spawn rates, better placement of certain items, and maybe even just a little bit better direction right at the very beginning. But with an early access title, it's important to understand that not everything that I'm talking about is going to be kept, and they may do some really crazy quality of life changes that I'm really excited to hopefully cover as this game progresses. And for any of you who are wondering what and who Subnautica is for, I think that Subnautica is a fantastic game whether you're playing with friends or solo, as both aspects of the game are moderately balanced. And as a personal fan of the series, I'm excited to see these changes, to see the updates, and I think that this is going to be a very fantastic game for anyone who wants to play something fun while also having a game that is, in my eyes, low stress when you're not exploring the depths and darkness, but also a game that can be very whimsical and fun. And of course, as always though, if you guys did end up enjoying today's review, do consider liking, following, and subscribing, as I do what I can to upload frequent reviews so that you all can check out new and amazing games for your upcoming future collections. And if you happen to have suggestions for upcoming future reviews, please let me know down in the comments section what you guys would like to see us cover, or let me know how you personally felt about Subnautica on early access, or if you had any gripes that you experienced during your gameplay time. But of course, I've been your host, NiccoSilverado. This has been yet another glorious review of Simply Honest, and this was Subnautica 2, available on Steam now. Of course, be sure to check out the updates of the game as they are going to be doing more awesome quality of life changes. But as always though, and forever, adios, sayonara, and goodbye. Editor's note, my wife is interrupting my recording. I'm recording! I'm recording! Have fun with that, Gelden. God, where was I? We might have to restart that one.